and I'm going to be showing you some from the past. One of the things I've been involved with my fly tying career is setting up fly tying theaters and been involved with the many conclaves that fly fishing groups and clubs have over the country. And they really highlight tyers that you may not have ever met. And one of the best ones is one in Idaho, both the Western Idaho Expo and the Eastern Idaho Expo, which is in Idaho Falls. They've been doing these fly tying get-togethers for a long time. We're talking over 30 years. So I want to do some highlights from some that I filmed in 2009 and 2010. And you'll get a chance to meet some names you know, and maybe some names you didn't know. And one of the nice things about tying at these expos is all the excitement and sounds of people going around telling lots and lots of fly fishing stories. Most of them may be exaggerated. But one of the nice things about the theater is you get a chance to listen to the tyers talk about their experiences and answer questions. I think you're going to enjoy them. We're going to start this week with several. We'll try to give you the most information. And I know some of you are going to say, wow, you know, I don't know about the materials. Well, these are really uncut. So, you know, you do your best on figuring it out. But I think you're going to enjoy the interaction with the crowd and with the tyers. And really uncut and I think extremely fun. Let's get going.
Okay, here we go. Okay, my name's Jeff Smith. I will hope maybe not to show you so much about how to tie a specific fly, but I'm going to show you a few things I think people miss, and I'm going to try to cover a couple things that I get asked questions about an awful lot. It's pretty obvious you can't tie any fly without, you know, good thread control. You've got to be able to make a good thread base. It's what starts your fly off. It's what makes a pretty fly. Floss bodies are brutal to a lot of folks. A lot of people just shy away from floss bodies for a multitude of reasons, but a lot of times it's just because they can't make them pretty. They come out lumpy and bumpy. The material I'm going to start off using here is a stretch nylon. It's a multi-filament nylon, and it stretches down into a real fine, flat material, and it doesn't twist very easily. All threads will twist as you wrap them around the hook. And one of the things you'll run into as you wrap over the hook like this, every time I go around, that twists down. Well, now you can see that's twisted pretty tight. And what I do, and I get a lot of questions about this, see my bobbin wants to spin. One of the things I do as I set and tie is I'll just give my bobbin a spin like that, and I go on tying. Well, that flattens my thread out. And I just have, by habit, started doing that over the years, and it continues to allow me to lay flat bases down. Now this particular base right here, what I'm going to do is tie a tag on this fly of this hot green. I'm going to put something under it rather than a material over the top of it. And I want this tag to build up a little bit for me so that it has some bulk to it. I'll wrap that forward, keeping my wraps jammed tight one up against the other. And I'm going to take this mylar tinsel, wrap underneath that. The color shows through from underneath. And I'll wrap back over it. With nice flat wraps. Now when that floss gets wet, it'll almost glow like a neon light. It's amazing how this looks in the water. And what I did by wrapping that tinsel under there was gave it something underneath other than the black of the hook. And even a non-black hook will show black through a light material like this. Now that, I don't believe that's always a bad thing. I truly don't. I think there's merit to having that black dorsal line down some flies, particularly on streamers and whatnot. Now I'm going to just spiral that up and get rid of it. I'm going to go to a white 6/0. And the reason I tie with a lot of white is if I wind up going to a lighter material, I don't have black thread showing through my material. Now at this point I'm going to tie in a rib, and I'm going to use it as a counter rib to bind down my hackle, if I can get it off the spool. And this is one of the things that people talk about, their first attempts at tying spey flies. One of the things they find most difficult is making them durable. Well, the durability issue comes in with this counter rib. We're going to wrap over going to crisscross backwards over our hackle wraps, and that's going to hold down that hackle for me. Now for a body on this, I'm using simple embroidery floss. It lays flat. It doesn't give you I'm in the construction business and I build saddles, and my hands are rough all the time. I love silk floss. There's nothing I'd rather tie with. When I'm tying presentation flies, when I'm tying flies to put under glass, I always use silk. It just looks better. But I have to either wear silk gloves, or I bring this little tool and I sand my fingers down with it. I found that to be a little more forgiving than my Makita grinder. It got a little carried away and caused additional problems. You just have to do something to handle that silk. It's so catchy. You know, it's like being next to Velcro. And what I do with my materials on this is I start my body floss under the hook. And I can turn this vise towards me, position that under the hook, and then I can turn it back out there where you guys can see. I tied that directly underneath the hook. And that keeps me from getting a lump or a bump on either side of the fly. Keeps my body really uniform from what we hope to be the perspective of the fish. What we want this fly to do is to travel through the water upright with the hook acting as a keel. And that's one of the reasons most all of your spey flies will be reduced a little bit. And what I mean by reduced, your old rules of fly tying said you started your body right at the barb. Well, you reduce this down and start it at the point, or even a little bit in front of the point, and that allows the weight of that hook to be a keel under that fly and keep it upright in the water so your hook rides right. If you ever notice a fly, you'll tie a fly or get your hands on a fly somewhere that you put in the water and it wants to turn over upside down. It's probably a weighted body fly. It's not all bad. Doesn't make it bad if it does get in the water. But steelhead fishing in particular, if you're swinging that fly through the water, your chances of foul hookups go up exponentially with that fly upside down. Because your leader will swing under a fish, that hook will drag by and you'll snag him every time. Whereas with the fly in the right perspective, as it swings under, your chances are much reduced. There again, not that that's always a bad thing. Maybe the only pull you get all day long too. So I'm not going to say. This fly is, the pattern itself is realistically a green butt purple king. The purple king is an old spey fly that, if you look in some of the books that have come out in the past few years, was very, very popular, and the color scheme, I think, has kind of been forgotten. Purple's still good. Purple's still one of those colors that people jump all over for steelhead, and we should. But purple and brown, it's a kind of an iridescent brown. This is a piece of chicken tail. It's called a couche tail. There was a number of years where we couldn't find these. Had a heck of a time finding these. The best ones I found that I could buy were to go to cleaning supply places and buy feather dusters and take them apart. And I found, and you could get from a black like this to the browns all in one, and I picked through them and high grade them, you know. Well, now there's couche tail available. You can buy it. Hoffman Whiting Hackle has some really good Spey hackle out there that's very available. Actually, it's better than a lot of this. If you can see, this has a fairly coarse stem on it, and those stems can give you trouble sometimes. They're on something this big. The stems are never round. They're always almost flat or rectangular. And when you go to tie, if you've ever noticed on hackle, it doesn't have a round stem. It wants to roll over. These are really, really guilty of that. They do it really bad, but it's what we deal with. I'm going to tie my hackle in just on the opposite side. Oops. Never did that on TV before. Now the embroidery floss is very close. If you read in some of the Spey fly books, they had some wools, cruel wool and some other old wools that were readily available then that aren't so available now. You can find them once in a while in yarn shops, but they're pretty tough to come by. This embroidery floss comes really close. One of the things you can do with it, if you want to tie smaller stuff, you can split it. It's easily split because each one of these strands is lightly twisted, so they're not all bound together. It works great. I've got a multitude of colors of it. Caddis egg sacks. This green's a good caddis egg sack. Throw it on there. Gosh, the sky's the limit, and you can get it in any color. They've got a good olive color that's almost a peacock olive, like that thread right there. That's a Danville's peacock olive thread. You can get this embroidery floss in the same color. It's amazing what you can do. And with this, I want to keep my body fairly slim, so I'll just keep it flat also. Every time I go over the top, I turn this thread back a half a turn. Every time I go around the hook, I spin my bobbin or my material. It always rolls over and it twists. And if I were to twist this up, and there again, you can do some kind of cool things with this too. Twist that up and go around, and it almost gives me a segmented look. I don't know, does the camera show you that? Can you really see how it goes from flat to segmented there? That makes a great caddis larvae. You take this color or this material in a caddis color, greens or browns or whatever it might be, and twist that and wrap it in that manner, and you get that real segmented, bumpy, wormy look that you get on a caddis larva. This material's, it's great. I can't say enough about it. But I want a nice flat body here, so I'm going to keep backing it up just a little bit. Try to continue nice and flat forward. About there. Now one of the things...
Seats available. Just step in the fly tying tyer.
One of the things you'll find, and if you learn to tie woolly worms and woolly buggers, you already know this, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If you tie a hackle in by the butt, the hackle stands up. If you tie a hackle in by the tip, or if you tie it in by the butt in the front and wrap backwards, it flows to the back. That's really the difference between a woolly worm and a woolly bugger, other than the tail, of course. The hackle on a woolly bugger is tied by the butt, wrapped to the back, or tied by the tip and wrapped to the front, and your hackle will cup or flow to the back. On a woolly worm, it's tied in by the butt and the back, and it stands up straight forward like this. And that's how originally the woolly worm was tied. Now this, I want that effect, so I'm going to wrap this around there, trying to lay that big old stem I talked about carefully. And if you buy this couche tail, like I said, I would recommend you buy the whiting or one better brand. If you wind up trying to use dime store stuff like this, sometimes it helps to soak it in a little water with a couple drops of glycerin in it, and it kind of rehydrates that stem. Your stems won't be so brittle, or a little easier to handle. That's true of old hackle. If you got some old stuff around that kind of got dried out, just take some tap water with a little bit of glycerin. You can get it at the drugstore. A few drops in that water and bathe that hackle in it. The stems will absorb that glycerin, doesn't hurt the feather a bit, and it's a lot easier to work with. Now this rib, I'm going to take this and I'm going to run it backwards, the opposite way from my hackle, called a counter wind. And it's really not as bad as you might think. You think everything gets all snagged up in there and caught underneath. If you just take your scissor points or a bodkin and work down through that once in a while, you don't bind down that many of them. What this will do is it'll keep those fish's teeth. It won't keep the fish's teeth from cutting your hackle, but when it does, it'll only come loose in a little segment. And it'll let you get a lot more hours of fishing out of a fly, or a lot more fish out of a fly. And I've had people often question me on that, and sometimes I wonder if it's worthwhile. Honestly, to catch a steelhead, if I had to give up a fly to every fish, wouldn't hurt my feelings at all, because I know how many hours I spent. It's not like I don't get to spend a little time tying flies. Now that looks pretty ratty, and what I do, and this is almost politically incorrect, is I just lick my fingers and I kind of smooth that back and give it a little mash. For one thing, this helps me out as I do the rest of my fly. It also gives you a little better idea of what that's going to flow like in the water. But in softer water, that fly is going to hold up pretty well. In harder water, swifter water, it's going to pull back and halo that body just a little bit. You're still going to get that green butt showing through because we didn't wrap hackle over that. You're still going to get a little bit of that purple center line in there, which purple's just, like I said, just a great color. Now, for a collar on this fly, what I really like is widgeon flank. And there again, one of the things I told somebody when they asked me to tie on their video theater, one thing you guys will find is I'm probably the most disorganized guy you'll find, but one of the things I don't like to do when I'm demonstrating flies to folks is I don't want to come with all my materials prepped and clean and taken care of, because you miss out on that part. You might not see what I did beforehand. These are all off wild birds. These are from ducks my son shot or I shot. I don't fool around pairing feathers or anything at the time, and these don't need to be paired for a collar. This is just a simple widgeon flank. Now this one, you can see it's actually already split part of it off the stem. And if you want to reduce this down, it's easy to do. Once that's split, that peels right off the side. There's no butt ends, no fibers left, no anything. It comes clean right like that. And that'd be great, but it's the wrong side for what I want to do. If you can see, if I go to wrap over the top with that, it's going to go the wrong way. So I'm going to grab this other one here and hope it's not split. And it's not. It's complete. That's a whole feather right there. What I'm going to do is clean up the butt just a little bit and try to get down into the area. And it's usually pretty easy on these colored ducks. You can see the stem doesn't get too thick until we're down in here where the color starts to change. Once that stem gets pretty thick down in there, it's a little harder to manage, particularly on wild birds. They are not known to have too round of stems or too good a quality stems. But that right there we can probably deal with. That's not too bad. What I'm going to do is tie this in by the tip. Just pull back a little bit, clean away from the tip of the feather a little ways. And I try to get them pretty even so they're back away from the tip about like that. And it gives me plenty to tie down. There's a little bit of that tip I can get a hold of there. I'm going to take that and tie it in right over here next to me. One of the things when you're tying in something by the stem like this, it's going to want to slip out. Particularly, I'm using an unwaxed thread. Now, it's slick like silk, and it will pull out, gives you fits. So what I try to do is tie that in, and then I just fold those few fibers right back in, and they'll just get lost in my collar. You're never going to know they're there. Now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to fold this hackle. And on most of the scissors we get nowadays, one blade is slightly serrated. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's a serrated blade here and a smooth blade here. Do not try to fold with your serrated blade. It's like trying to fold with hacksaw. Doesn't work well. You want to, and it's there again, just habit. I've got to where I always put the smooth blade on my finger, and that way when I flip it up, the serrated blade goes down. I've got the smooth blade up where I can use it to fold. And there again, that's just habit. I do it if I'm tying mayflies, even whatever it is. Now I'll take that blade and I'll pull on that feather just a little bit. Now Mick, watch carefully. We've been working on this for a long time. And I'm just going to lay that on the stem and I'm going to drag it back against that. And can you guys see how that breaks those fibers down and gets them to fold back away from the... Let's try that. Can you see what that did to those fibers? It just broke them away from the stem just a little bit, didn't remove them, didn't peel them off, just folded them away from the stem. Now what that's going to do for me is get them all to lay to the back and not be caught under the stem and go in odd directions. It makes them lay a lot nicer. And I'll just take this and wrap around here. And I tend, you'll look at pictures of Spey flies, and you'll talk to some Spey fly dressers. They'll tell you my flies are way overdressed, and they are. They're not classic Spey flies because I do tend to put a little more material in my flies. I think that's partly the kind of water I prefer to fish, partly the look I like on my flies. There you can see all those fibers look correct now. They don't look like they're going off in a different direction. All those duck fibers look really correct. And that barred duck gives it a really nice kind of a halo effect around the front. Just really encases that fly very well. For a wing, we're going to do bronze mallard. And to do this wing properly, you have to have a pair of feathers. One from the right of the duck and one from the left of the duck. And on your mallard, these will be under the wing, coming around on the back. You'll find them. They look very similar to the breast feathers, except they have this one bronze edge. These are wild birds. You can see, obviously, it looks to me like there's been about a number 2 shot go right through that spot right there. So once in a while you get that bad spot. That's okay. There's kind of a sweet spot in these feathers, and that is a good break point right there where that's at. What I do to prep these is I just peel this backside clean. You're not going to use that. Peel away everything down here that's no good. You can see where the barring stops about here, just about where that splits at anyway. That's getting into an area you can't use too much. That stuff gets pretty mushy, and it doesn't tie in quite right. They separate too much. They won't hold up. I'll go about here, and we'll try this bottom one and see what happens. There's one. You can get several wings out of one of these. You don't, it's not just like you get one out of a feather. Pardon me while I clean this one up back here where it's a little easier for me. And that's one, some of the old fishing where there's October caddis, you don't, fishing dry is an awesome way to catch steelhead. It's incredible to take steelhead dry. However, it does really limit the number of fish you're going to catch. I usually like, if I'm fishing when there's October caddis out, I think orange is the way to go. And if it's that time of year and they're in the water, it's the way to go. I'll go with this pattern. It's going to look a lot the same, little color changes and a little bit of subtle changes in how it's going to flow in the water. I'm going to do the same thing with the butt of this. It's just my mylar underneath that. You can use silver. There's guys that swear at mylar and swear by metal tinsels. I use a lot of metal tinsels. I find for most folks they're pretty tough to deal with. They break a lot, your edges will cut your thread. There's a lot of things about what are truly good metal tinsels that are just, they take a lot of working with them to get them how you want them to work. So especially something that's going to be under a base like this is, can't see the point in not using these plastics. They're really nice to use. They always lay flat. They give you a nice seal on that thread under there where you're not going to get the black showing through, like I said before. Plus, this top layer is going to really glow nice for us. When it gets wet, it's almost like a neon sign. If you're, I choose not to. I do know guys who will coat the butts of these flies with a cement of some kind. If I'm going to do anything on this to really toughen it, if I figure I'm going to be able to fish this fly all day anyway, which I very seldom ever do, I'll take my bodkin and a little bit of super glue, and I'll just put a real thin line of super glue right down the top of the hook, right down the top of that tag. And then it's bulletproof. I mean, if it gets cut underneath, it'll just be a couple little threads sticking out each side. But given this stretchy nylon, you don't hardly have that problem because no fibers ever end. It's all nylon fibers throughout. Colors are consistent throughout. I'm going to use the same rib. And now that I said it early on, you see me spin that bobbin a lot. You can really see about now that thread starts looking pretty fine. I'll spin my bobbin back and it just got a lot wider and flatter. And that's what lays that body nice and flat. And one of the other cool things you can do with this iridescent, or this stretchy nylon rather, in your coarser dubbings, obviously everybody's loop dub. Coarser dubbings are almost always better in a loop than they are in touch dub. They just don't touch dub well. You can take this nylon and split it. And this is also a nylon material. It's called seal dub. It's a fake seal. You can get SLF. You can get real seal if you can find it. Anything like that makes a great dubbing for this particular pattern. You can do this. This is also how I tie my green butt skunks. Tie on my green butt, and I switch to a black nylon like this. Now, I'm taking my finger out of here is usually where I drop a bunch. Not too much today. I'll have to clean it up a little bit. Bear with me. There we go. Now, we'll just take this and we'll spin our bobbin until that thread starts to wrap up in a loop. And get your length right. It really goes easy. You can just turn him loose and let him go like that. If you noticed, I bulked it up a little bit up here with what's going to be the front. I'm going to taper it out just a little bit here. And then I like to rough it up just a little bit. So I take one of these. This is just a 22 caliber cleaning brush stuck in a little wood handle. I just take that, reach in there and rake that stuff out, rough it up a little bit. And I can shape that body just a bit. Make sure it's exactly how I want it to be. Now, stand all that up to the front. This time this rib I'm just going to put in here the way you'd conventionally wrap it. Now, that's one other thing you'll read in a lot of your salmon fly and steelhead fly books. the old Salmon Fly Dressers Guild, they were pretty crazy about some things. You had to do a certain number of turns of tinsel. You had to make sure you had the right number on there, or the guild wouldn't certify your flies. And then, of course, the king or the prince or the duke or whoever in the hell you were selling to wouldn't buy them. So I've deviated from that. I really don't care. Some is good. If it looks right, it looks right. Yeah, I'm not. I rake it out again to pull those ends out from under that. Comb them back. Now I'm going to take goose shoulder feather, and these are store-bought. I've got a bunch at home that are from wild birds that I've done myself. These are just a little easier to deal with. I find that marriage goes a lot simpler for me the less things I dye in my wife's kitchen. Mick knows this story quite well. Worked at a fly shop here in Boise for a number of years, and the guy that I worked for and we ran out of black marabou in the shop, and so we took all the olive and all the extra brown and all the stuff we could find, and we took all of our rit dye and our vinegar, and we dyed up a bunch of black marabou. Well, we had to have it the next day, so I took it home and I threw it in a pillowcase and I put it in the dryer. Rit dye doesn't set real quickly, and it will come out, and the inside of our dryer was really, really black, and it came off on towels and ladies' under things and other such as that. We were in a lot of trouble for a while about that. So I just find that buying some of my materials dyed is a lot simpler than doing it anymore. At least cheaper, because I can't afford a divorce. And I'm going to fold this just like I did before. See those fibers just break back away from the stem of that, and they'll wrap down perfect every time for me. Particularly, you'll find this to be really, really important on these coarser stemmed materials. Getting about to where that stem's going to break. You'll learn to kind of have a feel for that. Those stems will start feeling pretty washy on you, like they're going to go. I just quit. Now, I'm going to change to my black. There again, just by twisting around that thread like that, I half hitched it 4 or 5 times to itself, and it's never going to come out from under there. If you always do it on the bottom, particularly on these return loop eye hooks, you wind up with any lumps and bumps in your head on the bottom side, where when you build your head up, it looks nice. Now, what I'd like to put on there, find it, and I think I just did. There we go. Like I said, bear with me. This is golden pheasant crest, or tippets, dyed a rusty orange. Now, I don't know if you've ever spent a lot of time up close, and this isn't really a microscope, but if you look real close at that golden pheasant, it's still got a lot of that shine to it that they have in natural state. Whatever color you dye them, they'll really take that on, but they keep that iridescent shine. And the cool thing we found about it in looking at it under a microscope really closely, these feather fibers are almost trilobal. They have flats on them, and those flats are like little mirrors. They reflect. They really, really do a nice job in the water. Once they get wet, every one of them's got a little iridescent flash to it. I'm a huge believer in it. I think, honestly, our forefathers that tied with a lot of golden pheasant learned some things that we probably should follow up on a lot more carefully than we do. Now, I'm going to tie this in by the tip also, surprisingly. It's going to look a little funny to you when I do it. But I've stripped it back about that far and left so much tip out there. I'm going to tie this in, fold that tip back so that I've got a good secure tie-in point right there on top. I'm going to fold this guy back, and then I'm going to trim that off because that's going to leave a little clump there that's kind of going to look odd in my collar. Trim that off, and then I'll fold this just like I did the duck and goose. Just running my scissors across that to fold them back. And you'll find some materials that are more difficult to fold than others. That one didn't want to go, so I'll grab it, hold it out of the way. Once I get that first one in there, then it goes pretty good, see? They lay right back over that. Just a couple, 3 wraps of that's plenty. It gives you just nose up, hold them back out of the way. It's a little deep. Build that head back just a little bit. Then you'll find when you're mounting these bronze mallard wings, be real conscious of what you're mounting them to. It's a foundation. Your thread and your build-up under there is always a foundation for the next material that's going to go on. So we want a nice rounded plateau for those to set on top of, just slightly rounded. The beauty of a return loop is you have a flat surface to start with, not just a round of the hook. And so I've got a flat spot with just a little bit of a hump in the middle of it. And that's going to let those bronze mallard wings tent over there like I like them to. And I'll use the same feathers as before. This one's the one that's got the hole in it already. I'm going to take it, separate that piece clear out. I can't use the one with the hole in it, obviously. If you get these, like I say, especially using wild birds, and some you buy in the store, they'll come split like that. Piece split out of them. Just take that and lightly stroke them back together a few times, and they'll marry right back together. And that's how you build married wings for a salmon fly. You take multiple fibers off of multiple feathers and you put them back together like they all came in one feather. And it's a daunting process sometimes, but that's all there is to it. These fibers all have little interlocking flue on the side of them, and as you stroke them back together, they'll interlock back together as long as they're relatively clean. And I don't have any kind of a rule on the width of my wing. I really don't. On this size one, I generally go about a 1/4 inch wide. I don't count fibers. I don't, if I'm building a fly to put under glass that's really going to be scrutinized, I do count fibers. But on these bronze mallard wings, you'd have to have a microscope to count your fibers. It's just a matter of getting them close and going with it. And those two aren't too bad. They're pretty close. Probably the one on my left's 1 fiber wider than the one on my right. I won't slash my wrists over that. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cross those at the base like that, down about where the color changes. Get my tips pretty even. I'm going to set them right there on top, slightly onto my side. Hold them on there. Roll them to me just a little bit. Go over the top with a fairly soft loop. Over the top with one a little firmer and tie them down. And those went on really good. I'll quit now. Yeah, those went on nice. See, they rolled in there real nice. There's a nice back on them. They held together well, didn't bust apart. Get them centered up pretty good. Start building my head just a little bit here. Same deal. I'm going to switch scissors real quick. Go to these super sharps and get in and cut those butts off. See if I can get them close enough to suit me. That head's not looking too bad. I'm not going to do too much more to that one. Usually I swing them, yeah. I'm a little weird. I'll cast upstream a little bit. I like to fish my Spey flies a little deeper, and I don't really like to fish sink tip, so I'll cast upstream just a little bit, let them settle before I start my swing. I'll just mend 2 or 3 times to get that fly as deep as I can get it. It's really simple. Jock Scott grease line fishing, when he talked about his deep method, same deal. Fishing a floating line and letting them sink. As far as head cements go, honestly, the sky's the limit. You do what you want to do. I don't use a lot of head cements. I don't have a problem with it. Mick has a theory and doesn't use head cement. Believes it makes the fly, gives the fly a taste. It's a chemical thing in the water. Doesn't like it. I won't argue his point. The guy's caught a lot more big trout out of a float tube than I ever will. So, I think it has real merit to the point. If you want to use them, by all means use them. There's some really good water-based head cements out there now that I think probably have a little better methodology than the lacquer-based ones that were so stinky. The ones we used to make ourselves were made out of hardwood floor finishing lacquers, and we had to wear a respirator to make the damn stuff. It was horrible. It was nasty. So, use super glue if you want to. I mean, it works great. If you want to hold them together forever, it'll do it. Pardon me? Well, there again, as far as simulating something, I couldn't put my finger on anything. I don't know that there's a steelhead fly out there that most people fish. At least western steelheaders don't target fish like eastern steelheaders do. I mean, you guys back there, you'll fish hex nymphs, you'll fish, you tell me. I know some of the stuff you fish. They're really impersonistic, matching something that's in the water. Very often we don't. Like I say, this orange one will be my go-to if I'm in water that's got October caddis and I know the fish are looking at the Grand Ronde in September and October when those big caddis are hatching and they are almost that orange and they're almost scary when they come across the water. That they look like a bat, man. They're a big bug. That's my go-to fly. But I don't fish it dry. I fish it just under the surface. Just let it swing along. If I can get it to make a ripple in the top, I think sometimes I get better responses, but I also think that's just because I get to see them take it. If it gets deeper, they eat it. But I think orange is a trigger at that time of year. I think the browns and purples with a hot bite on them like this, it's just a good winter color. It's just like early in the spring when the water's cold, your bass guys are going to go with their purples and blacks. The old rule of thumb on steelhead flies was, it really doesn't much matter what color your fly is as long as it's black. If you had to start out somewhere every day, or if you'd only have one in your box, it'd still be a damned old black skunk. I mean, that fly catches fish. You keep it in the water long enough, and it's going to catch it. You guys want to see anything different? Want me to do something? I'm running out of inspiration.